Welcome today. Thank you for attending the webinar, Finding Risk and Opportunity with Usage Vizor. I'm Ann Stone, Senior Manager at TBI Communications. TBI is a marketing consulting agency specializing in serving organizations in the research communications ecosystem. We have worked with HighWire this year to share insights and benefits offered by the visual analytics on the Vizor platform. For the webinar today, I've included the dial-up and attendee access code on the footer of all slides. We recommend dialing up by phone. If you have any trouble with the audio during the course of the session, please dial in with the information on the slides. With us today is John Sack. John is one of the founders of HighWire Press. He focuses on market assessment, client relations, and technology innovation to understand where technology and publishing industries are going and find the best way for us to get there together. John has lately been spending time on metrics to assess the health of publications and publishing programs. Answering the question, what metrics matter, is part of the reason for the development of Usage Vizor. Customers simply want to know more, and the metrics that matter depend on the point of view you take. A note about the GoToWebinar logistics. Attendees will be on mute for this session. To ask questions or communicate with us, please use the chat box, which is located at the bottom of your GoToWebinar control panel. If you're having difficulty hearing, please check your audio settings. We plan to answer questions at the end of the session. We'll be monitoring the chat section and encourage you, and the question section. We encourage you to ask questions throughout. If we can't answer them during the session, we'll follow up. The session is being recorded, and account managers will be able to share the recording upon request. So now we'll begin the presentation. Just as by way of introduction and context about usage data, as we all know, there has been a serials crisis, as it's been termed over the years, in the context of the subscription journal business. And new open access models are still not fully tested across regions and disciplines. The difference today is that there are new views to the demand for content and new approaches for subscription management and acquisition. Our librarians today are more sophisticated consumers and are quite analytical. They have to be. The PCG library budget predictions of 2016 indicated that of those in a consortia, most, 58%, believe that spending will stay the same over 2 years among academic and medical health institutions. And PCG forecasted that serials budgets would only increase by about 1.4% globally, with North America being flat at a 0.2% increase, and some sectors indicating a decrease. Now, that also, another data point to consider is the pricing projections from EBSCO and Outsell indicated that in a 5% to 6% overall effective publisher price increase for academic and academic medical libraries in 2017 prior to currency impact. So the EBSCO report found that big deals and consolidation among publishers in the industry also puts pressures on librarians to find cuts, often looking at smaller publishers. So every year the librarians are under pressure to figure out how to balance their collection management needs within their budget constraints while publisher pricing is going up. And the pressure is on publishers to demonstrate the necessity of their content for the library's patrons. And they're looking, as librarians are looking at demand-driven acquisition and evidence-based acquisition, putting the spotlight on usage data and cost per use is important. But it's not new, and publishers have been adapting. There's been a long history from a sales and marketing perspective of my own of finding new ways to drive increase in readership and thereby reduce the cost per use. The challenge to marketing is making that sustained growth and engaging and re-engaging readers in attracting new audiences as well. The one thing we know for certain is that librarians get really more annoyed than anything when publishers or any other vendor sends out a campaign to direct their patrons to ask them how to manage their collection and budget. While librarians do, of course, want to take the needs of their community into account, they don't want a third party coming between them and their collection management, and they're basically their job. So when you're considering how you're marketing and selling to librarians and looking at usage campaigns, you have to think carefully about how you're using this data and what kind of campaigns you might structure around it. From an editorial perspective, evaluating usage can identify how readers are engaging with the content features and help evaluate the opportunity and need for changes to features to continue to serve the readership and keep usage growing. We have more data than ever, but no more time in the day to look at it. And that's where Usage Vizor comes in. It's a tool to provide deeper, faster insights to inform sales and marketing strategies and help editors develop the journal in many ways, a few of which we'll touch on today. So when thinking about usage, what your sales organization needs to know and what your customer wants to know requires insight into the different sets of data and the ways of crunching the numbers. Librarians look at the very big picture first, and they're time-starved as they try to do that annual juggling act of subscription renewals and managing all other aspects of their responsibilities to their university and their patrons or their institution. And they're less likely to work on questions of the content level of what content are people engaged with. They're more likely to ask questions around subscription management. Which pricing tier applies to me? How does usage factor into tiers? Can I switch from an annual subscription to a pay-per-view for some content? Should I buy some content as part of my consortium arrangement, or should I purchase it on my own? And what does my counter data tell me? Librarians today are taking a much more analytical approach, and there's an opportunity to support them in doing that. Now, as a publisher, you might be thinking more about your readership base and how to engage them in the content that you have with article-level marketing and other types of content campaigns that you might have, all to the effect of also in growing the usage and serving your customers. Your readers want to know what other people are reading, what they find useful, and many organizations have membership newsletters, publicity about research findings. You want to see the impact of all of that marketing on the usage as well. And also understand how to be more responsive in future campaigns. For example, looking at world events, we know in the past year the Zika virus was a major world event that focused people's attention on much research around that. And so you might want to drive more usage by also considering these kinds of impacts on world events and being responsive to them. So Usage Vizors, when you think about usage data, we think about it structured in from an institutional perspective and also from a reader perspective, giving the article view versus the institutional usage view. And John's going to talk a little bit now about how Usage Vizors was built with that in mind.
Thanks, Andy. So this slide shows the high-level structure of Usage Vizor. It's got two major components, two perspectives, if you will, just as Ann showed on the previous slide. One slide is, the left side is about your customers. The right side is about your readers, your authors, your editors. And we call these the institutional Usage Vizor and the article Usage Vizor. So I'm going to, in the slides that follow, we're going to first look at the institutional perspective, and then we'll look at the article perspective. And I'll be clear about when we switch from one to the other. But as you use Usage Vizor, you'll go down either the left path or the right path. Next slide, Ann. So institutional usage, as we said, is about your customers and your prospects. You're looking at the possibility of subscription renewals. where there might be risks in certain kinds of renewals. For example, is usage at certain key accounts declining? You want to know that before they do, and Usage Vizor gives you the tools to enable you to do that. Similarly, a major metric that is used by librarians now is cost per use. This has actually been pretty hard for publishers to calculate because it's been hard to mash up, if you will, information about your fees to your subscribers with the data about usage. And Usage Vizor solves that problem. And then finally, we want on the left side here for you to be able to see what librarians are seeing. Next slide, Anne. Now, similarly, just flipping briefly to the right side of that previous page, when we talk about article usage, as I said, we're talking about readers and authors and, of course, editors. And the functions in this part of Usage Vizor is about editorial development and editorial promotion. It's very similar to what we do in Impact Vizor, where we're looking at citations, except now we're looking at articles based on usage. So we're looking at readership impacts as opposed to citation impacts. And here we can do things like look at whether certain content sections are performing. Are you publishing a lot of something that's not getting read very much, for instance? And what are the trends in overall and in certain sections? And are there some particular authors that you should, or types of articles that you should be publishing more of? Next slide, Anne. So all of HighWire's Vizors, and we've released Impact Vizor last summer, 2015 summer, and Usage Vizor is now released as of early November. And we have several more Vizors in the planning stage. All of them share some common aspects. They're relatively quick to deploy. It's not like building a new site. It generally will take us about 4 to 6 weeks to deploy a site. Second, we integrate the data so that rather than just looking at total usage data, you can slice and dice the usage data by your metadata. So, for example, you can look to see articles of a certain type, or articles in a certain collection, or articles of a certain age, and control your analysis based on your metadata as well as the overall usage data. Third, it's easy to use by editorial and publishing staff. There's no language required. If you can move a mouse, you can use Usage Vizor and Impact Vizor. And if you are an Impact Vizor user, you will have some conservation, if you will, because you'll see that many of the same visuals appear in Usage Vizor and Impact Vizor. It's also, the word I use here is transparent, in that if you see something, you can usually click on a picture and drill down to get the data below the picture to see why is something performing a particular way. And what you might find, for example, is, thanks, Anne. What you might find is that certain data, you might be looking at an average and discover when you drill down that the average is not a very good metric. It might be that there's one article that's getting 100 times the use of everything else in a particular section, and that's the kind of thing you can only really see when you drill down. And then finally, exportable. You can export data in Usage Vizor to Excel so that you can mash it up with data in other systems. Next slide, Anne. What I want to do is take just a quick look here at how it works. It's an interactive system. That is, you pull up a page. It's on a web browser page, and you use these pop-ups and sliders that we're showing in gray in the top third of the page to control what you're visualizing. We're using monthly data. We met with 9 or 10 publishers about their requirements for usage analytics, and it's kind of interesting. Monthly data was overwhelmingly what people needed first. There were only a few use cases for daily data, and it's counter-compliant data. So if you talk about usage with an institution, you'll be using the same numbers that they're seeing. Now, in terms of onboarding, it's, as I said, relatively quick. We configure the Vizor service and data. You can send us optional data that helps us do cost per use calculations. HighWire doesn't know about how you bundle your products or how you price them. So you have to supply us with data to allow us to do cost per use calculations. It's pretty simple. We had 3 publishers test file format, and nobody had any problems with it. And you can also use custom fields to allow special analytics projects. So, for example, you could do analytics to see whether articles where the corresponding author was from Italy are doing better or worse than articles where the corresponding author is from Germany. That kind of thing. Why you'd want to do that, I don't know, but that's the kind of thing that you can undertake. And finally, there is training. We do a 1-hour turnover call once we've set it up, and there is also quite complete documentation.
Before we move to the next slide, I just wanted to give an idea of an example of the use of the custom fields and doing special projects. So one example would be the type of institution data that you collect as a publisher related to the channel of the organization, the institutional subscriber, whether they be a funding agency, a government agency, or academic or medical library. You can then have another view, and we'll show that a little bit in the future slides. That you'll have another view to the types of averages and how they differ depending on, or not averages and medians. You know, the cost per use can vary depending on the channel, and you will also want to evaluate some of the data in the context of supporting your sales efforts. And when you do that, some sales organizations are organized by channel. So that's one example of a type of custom fields, use of custom fields.
It's a good point, Ann. You can do custom fields for both institutions and for articles, for obviously different types of analytics. And it's probably a good point to point out that if you have Impact Visor and you've done custom fields for articles, those same custom fields are available to you in Usage Vizor, so you don't have to do anything twice. So take a look now. We're going to go drill down into the institutional view. So if you go to the next slide, Ann. Mm-hmm. The institutional view will be about the next 10 slides. And when you first go into the institutional view, there's a viewer called the Overview, and it's going to show you some things. This is the top gray area in the slide deck, top third of the slide deck, and we see some things in green and red. And generally what we try to do here is show you where green are good trends, red are questionable trends. And we present you with both year-to-date information as well as month-by-month information. And sometimes month-by-month is just too sensitive a kind of metric to look at. But other times it could point out something pretty significant that's just happened, and you wouldn't want to wait a year to find out that your turnaways tripled. Something's going on. That's a good time to take a look. So, in the institutional view, there are really 2 kinds of things that we're doing. We're first looking to find out which subscribers need your attention, or where your attention would be valuable, because there's an upsell potential, or there might be a service or delivery problem, something that's changed. And that's where you're looking for individuals. And that's in the first set of bullet points. And what you find often when you look at individual subscribers is that there are outliers. They can be outliers in either direction, where some strange new activity is started, like text mining at an institution, and maybe you should relook at whether they're appropriately priced. Maybe a campus is merged with another campus and they should be in a different tier. Or maybe somebody's use has basically gone to zero, and you need to figure out what's going on there, because obviously that would threaten a renewal. Then at the bottom, what we're doing is we're looking at aggregates of usage within a group, and here you can use those pop-ups and sliders to create groups, and then look at how things compare across groups. So, for example, if you have 5 pricing tiers, you can see what the average usage is across those tiers, and then figure out if there are some outliers who really should be in a different tier. Next slide, Ann. Now the complement, this is essentially the same top bar. It's just now I've focused, instead of focusing on usage and cost per use, we're focused on turnaways. And here, turnaways are fascinating. They can be pretty volatile, but what they represent is someone trying to gain access to content who's been unsuccessful. And this could be because there's a new academic program starting up, because someone's canceled something that they shouldn't have canceled, and so on. So we give you, in a dashboard, we give you a red and green indicator for turnaways, but we also let you drill down to turnaways so you can identify specific subscribers to evaluate for additional sales. Next slide, Ann. So as mentioned before, there are these pop-ups and sliders which help you slice and dice data. And for the institutional view, the pop-ups and sliders are the ones you see here. You can target individual journals of yours. You can look at certain types of usage. You could look at only abstracts, or total usage, or only PDFs. But you also have fields like tier and sales agent consortium and so on that you can use to target particular channels. So, for example, if you have certain agents and you want to give them access to this data, then they could focus on just what's in their region. There are also custom fields, and you see at the left side in the top third, custom number 1. Thanks. And there are 3 of them, and these are fields you can use to put anything in at all that you'd like to use for analytics. Next slide.
John, there was a question on the from the attendees asking how frequently one can update that custom information. Could you speak to that?
Sure. You can update it as often as you'd like. You control it. It's, as we say, self-op. There is an administrative web page that you can go to upload new files, and it's totally under your control. So you could do it a couple of times a day, or once and set and forget.
There was also a question, well, I'm going to, that specific question was related to the slide that we're on. So we'll keep asking questions, folks, and we'll come back to the ones as we can address them in the slides as we go or at the end. There's been several useful questions we'll get to towards the end.
All right. Next slide.
Yep.
So continuing on in institutional usage, one of the big things we've done here is allow you to look at usage with a couple of different lenses. And it's pretty important to understand this to get the most use out of the product. One of the ways you can do this is look at subscribers who have, say, the most and least usage. Pretty obvious. But another thing you can do is look at change. So rather than just looking at people who have the most and least usage, you can look at people who have the most change in usage. So it might be a small account with a very large change in usage, so they wouldn't show up in the first bullet of most and least usage, but they'd show up with the most change. And you can do this by percent change or by absolute value. And then finally, you can do the same thing with cost per use, which is pretty handy because the cost per use is a great way to normalize across your subscribers for how much they're how big they are versus small, how much they're paying, and so on. So we have two different types of viewers inside institutional usage. The top one with most and least usage is called a tracker. The bottom two, where you're looking at change, are called comparators. So you can just think of change and comparator, the C words. And we're going to look at both of these in the next few slides. Anne, you have the next slide?
So this is the institution-to-institution cost per use comparator.
And here what we're looking at is being able to see whether certain institutions have changed significantly, and then see whether it's a pattern. So horizontally in this graphic, we're looking at individual institutions, and they can be sorted by the vertical columns, which are years. So you can look at your highest cost per usage in 2016 and see whether certain institutions had a high cost per usage in 2015 and 2014 as well. That would let you know whether there's a pattern. And this can be good because obviously there are spikes in many aspects of usage, and this will let you know whether a spike is in fact a one-time kind of event. Next slide.
Sorry.
The companion to the cost per use comparator, we're going to look at another version of the cost per use comparator. The companion, as I said, is a tracker, which looks specifically at absolute values. So what I've asked here is for the cost per use tracker to show me a list of institutions, and we blurred out the institution names, in order of highest cost per use to lowest, and I've specifically looked for institutions that have cost per use above the pay-per-view price. And so the system gives us a list on the left, which you can browse, and you can look at any particular one by clicking on it, and then as soon as you click on it, you get the graphs on the right, which show you whether the cost per use is bouncing up and down, and you can see that it is. And then, of course, is the usage bouncing up and down. And obviously, if one of them is bouncing, the other is probably bouncing too. So here we can see that the real anomaly was 2015's cost per use being so low because the usage was so high. It increased 277% 2015 to 2014. Next slide. So now going to the comparator version of cost per use, here I'm asking the system to tell me which institutions have had the greatest change in their cost per use. And so you can see at the top here, something, that this is what I mean about data bouncing around. Here's someone whose previous cost per use was $2.14 at the top line, and now it's $1,400. What could that be? Well, you click and it gives you the detailed information. Oops. What we've done here in this slide is click on the fourth item down where it went from $1.48 to $91, which is a pretty big difference. And what you can see is that usage in 2016, which is our current year, so this is I won't call it real-time data, but it's month-by-month data. What we can see is that this is an account you should be taking a look at because usage has been going down 2014 to 2015 and then just about dropped to zero in 2016. So there's a problem there. Next slide, Ann. And now we're going to look at turnaway analysis. So previous slides we were looking at usage. Now we're looking at turnaways. Well, what are turnaways? Turnaways are potential gold in that they can show you we analyze the usage of anyone in your subscription database who has an IP address. They do not have to be current subscribers. They just have to have been subscribers at some point to some product such that you have IP addresses on file. This can show you what the turnaway analysis can show you, these things on the right here. They can show you institutions that have lapsed, that is, they didn't renew, so you're seeing turnaways from their academic community. They can show you the potential to sell additional titles into institutions that have subscribed to some of your journals, but not others. So the turnaways might be in, a new journal, for example, that they haven't yet subscribed to, but a hot journal. And then finally, if you sell by volume, and a number of publishers sell the back file separate from the current article file, then we can also show you usage, attempted usage, turnaways, if you will, of the people trying to access the back file. Now, take a look at the note down here. We have a new visor that we're evaluating to build called Prospect Visor, and that would allow you to look beyond your own database of customers and IP addresses. This only looks within your current database, your database of IP addresses. Ann?
There was a question from an attendee asking about the turnaway data, I think it's an attendee who may be familiar with Impact Visor, where Impact Visor, because you are looking at article level data by DOI, you can actually go and look at data for journals that are not necessarily published within the journal that the publisher, who's this Usage Vizor or Impact Visor, let me see how I can phrase this. In Impact Visor, you can see data about not only your own journals, but other journals related to citation data.
Yep.
In Usage Vizor, you can only see data related to your own subscriber base.
Yes, but they can be a subscriber in a very broad sense. That is, they just have to have been a subscriber at some point, and your database that you have on file with HighWire has to have IP addresses in it. We analyze the IP addresses.
And it will only show you the usage data for your own journals.
Right.
Or turnaway data for your own journals.
That's correct.
Yes. So, and it's all secure and private. Yep. And that. Okay. Yep. I think that probably addresses the person's question, but we can come back to it at the end if it doesn't.
All right. So this is, can you just go back, Ann?
Oh, sorry.
Quickly, what I wanted to comment was that this is the Turnaway Comparator, which lets us look, remember, comparator means change. So it lets you look at a rate of change at one period of time versus another. So what we're doing is looking at whether turnaways have significantly increased for a list of customers. There's also a turnaway tracker, which lets you look at the absolute number of turnaways, so that you could look at who has the highest number of turnaways or the lowest. Okay, next slide, Ann.
Okay.
I think the next slide is yours.
Yes. So being in marketing for many years in publishing and needing to talk to editorial boards about any big dramatic changes in usage, everyone sort of puts all hands on deck if there's a really strange anomaly and that comes up all of a sudden over a quarter. And oftentimes we have to worry about, are there robots, and different types of usage that was inflating the numbers before, and that's why it represents a drop now. Making sure the data is clean. But ultimately, if there's a problem with a subscriber base, and that's accounting for a lack of usage, that's really an urgent thing. So this subscriber inspector allows you to just quickly look at, were there any accounts that expired in the last 30, 60 days or are coming up to expire that could dramatically affect usage because the accounts themselves represent the larger user bases. So, and then you can look at it by filter, by country. So if you can imagine working with sales teams or sales agents and having regular calls and check-in, being able to target those types of accounts quickly by just at a glance seeing what's coming up. There's a variety of ways to use this, but mainly I think it's that quick and dirty. Oh gosh, did we just lose a big account for usage? Or are there many smaller accounts that add up to maybe have an effect on declining usage all of a sudden in an aggregate way? That was, I guess, the two main points about this slide. So moving ahead to thinking about this, you can imagine it's trying to solve any particular sales or marketing challenge ahead of you, working with the sales teams to think about where they need to target, if they have an upcoming presentation that they're going to be giving to a large consortia. Again, today the consortium might be doing these analysis, this type of analysis on their counter data themselves, and we as publishers may not be as familiar, but with what they're doing, and it might be good to have a conversation with your key accounts to understand what kind of information would be helpful to them. Maybe with Usage Vizor you can bring information and insight to the table that puts them at ease, gives them more confidence in how they're performing and benchmarking against other consortia in a general way. You could say, your usage is the best within your tier. You're getting, there's a lot of different ways that you can imagine presenting this data carefully to your clients in the renewal process, and then thinking about how the sales and marketing strategies are going to work together. If you do this kind of analysis, you can investigate what are your bigger opportunities. So we identified that if you're having a lot of turnaway demand from backfile from the older volume content, then maybe you prioritize doing a quick campaign to those institutions that features the backfile sales opportunity. That's just one example. There's many, but in terms of slicing and dicing where your opportunities lie, there's the turnaway information, and then there's looking at the cost per use and total usage at key accounts as they're renewing, and prioritizing that around sales meetings, around renewal cycles by region. So you can easily see that it's very strategic to do the analysis. Then once you do the analysis and you find you have so say you have some risks related to the fact that you have some key accounts renewing and their cost per use has gone up because their usage is declining. Now, as a marketer, you want to make sure that you're trying to influence demand for content. You can do some targeted campaigns with content that could particularly appeal. If we imagine, say, looking at the government sector, academic sector, whatever, what content should we be putting out in the market to these institutions that would be would actually influence demand and could move the needle on the cost per use in time to have an influence on the renewal process? That's the question. So that's the next view to Usage Vizors, where you can actually drill down to the article level and see what content do you think can make a big difference if you put it out there. And there's a lot of different ways to look at the article level content usage as well for editorial perspective. So we'll talk about that next. We'll talk about how are you looking at what content is resonating over time. Do content features in a section that used to be popular remain popular? Are new sections getting quick uptake? For example, launching a new section of review articles. How quickly and how much of an impact are those making? Another type of question. So moving ahead, this is the overarching at-a-glance article usage view that John will talk to.
Yeah, so now we're switching from institutional usage over to article usage. So if you remember that slide that had two on it, now we're going to the right-hand side of the slide. We're talking about article usage, not institutional usage. And when we start looking at so this is an article usage dashboard, one of the first things we noticed when we put this dashboard together is certain patterns could only be explained if you knew how many articles were being published and what types of articles. One of our pilot journals was a journal that had decided to shrink its number of publications, so usage was changing. So the top of this slide has the number of articles year on year, and then information about usage per article in the second line, and then total usage in the third line, and then at the very bottom you see month-by-month usage, which lets you take a look at whether there are seasonality patterns and whether you're on track with previous information. Next slide, Ann. Just as with institutional usage, you can slice and dice using these pop-ups and sliders. It's a different set of pop-ups and sliders. But it's pretty important to be able to normalize usage when you're doing certain kinds of analysis. So if you're looking at 5 or 6 years worth of articles, obviously 5-year-old articles will have more usage than 6-month-old articles. So what you might do is use the pop-up measure by and just make it the first 6 months of usage of every article. So you can do some comparisons across. The sliders on this are pretty interesting. What you can do is take a look at usage this year for articles in previous years. Next slide, Ann. Now, those of you who, can you go back a slide?
Oh, sorry. Because I was trying to speed it up just to do both at once, but that's okay.
Well, I just want people to be able to read the slides. This is similar to something you've seen in Impact Visor. It's letting you look at 2 dimensions at once. Here, the size of the box. Each of these is a type of article. Each box. The size of the box indicates the number of articles published in that article type, whereas the color of the box indicates the usage. So what we see here is that this type of article we publish the most of, the left half, is in fact getting the most usage. That's that's good to know. But if you go to the next slide.
Okay.
What you might want to know, and the next slide shows you, is the bottom half of this slide lets you look at per article usage. And what this tells us now is that, in fact, that left half doesn't get the most usage per article. It's that little red box in the middle, middle right, that gets the most usage. So this lets you look at how your publishing volume relates to your usage volume, and whether you're publishing the kind of content your readers are most interested in looking at. Next slide.
Well, and also how to, whether you need to punch it up.
Yes, if you want to publish more of some things and less of others, if you want to optimize usage. And of course, the value that your readers get from your publication. The next one is very simple. We call it the hot article tracker. What we're doing is looking at which articles get the most usage. And you can slice and dice articles so that you can look at only certain types of articles or only certain types of usage. Next slide. So from the hot article tracker, you might have found that a particular article, maybe it's a 5-year-old article, was really hot. In other words, it's gotten a lot of usage. What you might now want to do is drill down and say, well, is this article still hot, or did it get a lot of usage in its beginning days and it's since cooled off? And that's when you use this viewer, the article inspector. Next slide. Now, a key kind of analysis is to be able to look at groups of articles and understand how groups are perceived by the readers.
John?
Yep, I'm back.
Okay.
Here what we're showing is which groups of articles, and here we've grouped them by their collection code. You can see that in the group by at the top left of the visual. See which groups of articles get the most usage. And as soon as you spot that a group is getting very high usage or very low usage, because one of the things you might want to do is look not only at hot groups but cold groups. The next thing you want to do after you look at hot or cold groups is look at whether it's a consistent pattern over time, and that's the next slide. So here, we're looking at each line is a particular type of article. This is not, I think, sorted by collection the way the previous one was, but it could have been. And so what we've done is sort this by year. Each column is a year of publication, so that we can look at whether certain articles are consistent in being strong or weak. The golden line is the mean and indicates where the average amount of usage is across the whole set of articles. So you can see which ones are above the line and which ones are below the line. And some of them, were below, but they're moving up, which is kind of interesting. If you look at, let's see, it's right about in the middle. You can see an article type that was relatively weak in 2010, but now it's actually above average in 2016, and you can see the pattern by reading across that it's been gaining in interest year on year. And that pattern's also repeated just like 2 below. Next slide, Ann. And well, one of the interesting things you can do with these custom fields, you can see right about in the middle of your screen, custom 2 and custom 3. You can do custom analysis. So this publisher wanted to look at whether their free articles got read more or less than their subscriber-only articles. And what you can see if you go and look is the difference has been growing between free and paywall over time. They were pretty close together in 2010 through 2014, but in 2015 and 2016, the gap is bigger. One of the things that's worth noting is on this slide, the scale at the bottom is a logarithmic scale, so small differences can be pretty big. So this publisher was able to see that there is a demand for their content that is not satisfied through their subscribers. Next slide.
I just mentioned also it could mean that they have very successful marketing programs where they choose to make some content free, and that the marketing efforts around those free articles that are chosen for specific reasons may generate the demand. So coming close to the close here, we've talked about the views for sales and marketing targeting and looking at your strategic renewal strategies for institutions and looking at it several different levels by region, by country, by consortia, evaluating your tiers going into a new renewal process. Do you need to have another look at that? Are they performing the way that your customers would expect? Do you have requirements for transparency to your customers? So this could make that analysis much more straightforward. And you can also present your customers with information they may not have had to engage them in new ways. You know, it doesn't just have to be about selling all the time, but talking about the value of the content to them early in the sales process, informed by data, would probably be a strong presentation. But it does beg the question, you know, in looking at today's librarians and their own usage analysis, having those conversations with them about what kind of metrics matter to them. You don't have to be on the back foot and trying to figure out how you're going to solve for it with tools like this, making it easier to access. And we also, you know, took the article view and looked at all sorts of ways to identify which articles are going to resonate, which articles are successful in being, when they're promoted. They're drilling down to that detail of looking at trends by section. There's a lot of different ways to use this information in your campaign planning and in editorial strategies in terms of looking at who are the authors that are generating the most in-demand content. Do you want to feature them as members if you're a membership publisher, a membership organization and publisher? Possibly, you know, when you're looking at very detailed, specific topics, finding those articles that are on that topic that are in high demand. That author might be the best suited for a reviewer to add to your reviewer database. So if you're looking to grow your reviewer base, you know, this is another way to mine the information to find those high quality reviewers. We're looking forward to hearing about different use cases from more customers as Usage Vizor becomes more widely adopted. But we thought we'd just go through the frequently asked questions and address the questions that are on the webinar now. John, one of the questions that came up was a technical one. Will the institutional aspects of Usage Vizor cope with customer prospects who use Shibboleth and Open Athens? Can you answer that one?
As far as I know, I guess I'd like to check on that with the engineers. Shibboleth and Athens show up as institutions. That is, a Shibboleth identifier or an Athens identifier connect the user with a specific institution. So it should show up there. What you can't do is differentiate Shibboleth and Athens access from all other institutional access at that institution. But let me check on that, and I'll let people know if there's a if you just write down who asked the question, I can let them know if
Yeah, sure.
wrong.
And then now this would be the time to go over the frequently asked questions. You know, the how is the sort of usage visor, impact visor, pricing and packaging work, kind of.
Well, sure. So Usage Visor is a separate tool from Impact Visor. So we have two visors now. There is a discount if you have both of them, because we don't have to license software twice. As you could see, the article usage views are somewhat similar across them. There are if you just ask your account manager for pricing, they can generate pricing for you based on which journals, if not all of your journals, you want to include. So it's pretty quick to do that. It does take, I think I mentioned this early on, it takes about 4 to 6 weeks to bring up, to deploy, if you will. And part of that time is to work with you to develop the customization files if you want to use them. They're optional, but they're the ones we need in order to do cost per use calculations. If you're interested, you can ask your account manager for those file formats and let us know if you have any questions about them.
Okay, we've answered all the questions that came in through the Q&A panel and covered a few more. And the other question people had was this being recorded and will the slides be made available? And our intention is yes, we have to run the recording and process it and then hit this post button. And so the account managers will be able to set you up with the registration link to get to it at a future time. And we'll be doing a follow-up email as well. So,
and I did have one other question came in. I've got people here with me in the office. There was a question about. Actually, there were 3 questions that I got. One was, is books usage included? No, at this time, books usage is not included. We look forward to doing that, but it's pretty different kind of information, so it's not there. Second question was whether PubMed Central usage is included, and we've worked out the details of how to include it, but not so the quick answer is no, it's not included right now, but because it's not counter compliant, and so we didn't know. So when you add counter compliant to not counter compliant, and you get a mess, what do you do? So we've been sort of thinking through that, how to do that well. And then the third question I got was, what's next? What we're working on now for both Impact Visor and Usage Visor is an alerting tool so that you don't have to go to the system to look things up. If you can tell the system what kinds of things you want to know about regularly, it will send you the information when it has it. So you could say, tell me anytime an article gets more than 20 citations or gets more than 20,000 downloads. You could say, show me my top 5 articles every month. Those kinds of alerts are part of the alerting system. And we are building that now. It will be included in your Impact Visor and Usage Visor subscription when we roll that out, probably Q1 of 2017. We're also looking at the Prospect Visor. As I mentioned, that's the tool that brings in users for prospecting who are not in your current subscriber database. So it can be pretty useful to you in expanding your view. And we're evaluating now whether there's enough customer interest in that. We'd love to get your feedback if you are interested in that. So those are the additional questions I had come in.
Okay. Well, thank you all very much for your time today, and we hope you'll join us for another webinar in the future.
Thank you.